Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for another session of the Film Voyage. Today, we have with us the writer of your favorite films of the last decade and the director of some of the most, how do I put it, some of the most path-breaking films like Honeymoon Trials Private Limited, Talash, her most recent one being Gold. And of course, you know who she is. She's Reema Kagti. She's written Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara. She's written Gully Boy. She's written Dil Dhadakne Do. And she's also acted in Rock On.
Listen, that is not acting. Thank you for this great introduction, but that was just, jumping up and down. Yeah. So I don't think that amounts to acting.
No, but like when we saw that film and like later on after Talash, when we saw your interviews and everything, and again when I was rewatching, I was like, hey, like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme. It's like, yeah, there she is. And you like, and of course, this is something that we found out very recently. We hadn't noticed this. You dubbed the director's voice from Bombay Talkies, right?
Yeah, for Dibakar's film.
Let's talk about how you got into this. Like you're from your AD days when you were in AD on Lagan and Dil Chahta Hai. Just take us a little, back in your story when I found out that one of your stories got published by Tinkle. When you
wow, you're going really back, huh? That was
yeah.
Actually, that was my first paid job as a writer because you could, I used to read Tinkle comics, and there was Uncle Pi. You could send in a story, and they sent me something, yeah, like $15 or $30, and they published one of my stories. So that was, my first writing stint, paid
So just tell
writing
us what
stint.
the story was about.
It was something so silly about, this guy saying, I'm going to, he was going to throw everything to the heavens, and whatever came down, he was giving everything to God, and whatever came down, he would keep. But he knew law of gravity would work, so it came down to him, pretty much.
So you wrote this when you were 8.
Yeah, but honestly, I never really thought I was a compulsive writer even as a child. I never thought of joining film, really. Though I was a film buff and a huge Bachchan fan when I was a kid. Uh, I think I was somewhere around class 8 or 9. I was in school in Delhi, and I bunked school and went and watched Salam Bombay. And that literally, I went in as an audience and I came out as a director because I was like, this is what I have to do. I think it was the first alternative kind of film, Hindi film that I saw. So that really had a massive impact on me. And that's when this whole, from a film buff, I wanted to become a filmmaker.
Yeah. So when you started...
Yeah. So then when I started, obviously, my family is from Assam. My dad used to have a farm, really not related to filmmaking at all. And Janu Barwa, who is, he's married to my dad's cousin. He's my uncle. So I was sort of taken to meet him. And he suggested I get some kind of training. So I applied to FTI about 3 years in a row. And I always got through to the orientation round, and you go there 1 week of you do a bunch of stuff and that kind of thing, and I never got in. So then I did a 1-year media course, a social communications media course at Sapphire Polytechnic, and then I just started working. My first job was with Rajat Kapoor on a film called Private Detective. It was a very low budget film. So from assistant director, I was also used in production. Then I also had to assist the sound guy, who was Rasul Pukuti, by the way.
Yeah.
And I did a bit of work with the edit. In those days, Steenbecks were still being used. So for me, that was kind of a base. And then I just kept working as an AD till I wrote a script and started trying to make it.
Yeah. So before you like decided that I have, like now I have to make my first film, that AD period, and when you were learning stuff. So what was that process like? How did you like pick up on the craft of it? Like, this is how a director should, give it,
I mean,
building the world.
honestly, I think for me, my biggest film school probably was my DVD player. And I just watch films. I would watch minimum one film a day, but sometimes two films a day. When I wasn't working, I would be watching films the whole day. And yeah, that's pretty much, I think, what really helped me.
Which film do you think is like closest to being your influence in a big form?
There are too many to kind of thing out. But I mean, I loved Wong Kar-wai. I loved Pedro Almodovar. I loved Kim Ki-duk. I mean, I still love them. It's not like I loved them in the past. I think Scorsese, uh, who was a big influence. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So, assisting on films like Lagan and Dil Chahta Hai, what was the stuff that you picked up from there that kind of later on you see in your films now? If there was anything like that.
Again, I can't point to anything creatively, because honestly, when you're an AD, you're not really picking up that much on set. You're just running around like a headless chicken. Okay. I mean, obviously, it gets you oriented into like what is the process of filmmaking, the process of shooting. But like I said, I mean, that comes from watching films calmly. And you're hardly ever that when you're an AD.
So when did you decide exactly that, okay, now enough of this 80s stuff, and now I have to make my first film? When was that like decision?
When I was about 28, I wrote my first script. It never got made. A lot of people met me, you know what I'm saying? But that was a very small alternative kind of project. That was around 2003, 2004. And things really hadn't opened up in the film industry, in the film industry. So, I mean, because I had all these very successful, very commercial films on my CV as an AD, a lot of people met me. But the minute I used to tell them the story of my film, it was basically about this woman who worked as a maid in different people's houses, and she was a single mother, and she was struggling to educate her child. So the minute I used to start telling my story, everyone's face used to fall. And they used to start saying, "Arey yaar, write a female Dil Chahta Hai," or something like that. This is like really depressing. So I tried to make that film for a while. That didn't happen. And then I wrote Honeymoon Travels. And yeah, somehow, things went better with that one. And Excel got involved in it. And that film got made.
So, like Honeymoon Travels Private Limited, how was that? Like when you were you coming from that space that, okay, no one's interested in making a very alternative indie kind of a film right now, so I'll write an ensemble. So was that ever a thought?
Yeah. And also, right now, people look at Honeymoon like it's the most commercial film on earth. But around 2006, 2005, when I was looking to do it, it wasn't. It was considered very alternative. And actually, the genesis of it was, I had written Aspi and Zara's track as a short film about how there is no perfect couple
it felt like
in the world. And I had written out, a short film script and gone on to work on Laksh as a first AD. And I don't know, one day running up and down the mountains in Ladakh, it just struck me. I was like, why don't I write this out as a full-on feature-length film? And that's when I wrote, the idea of a package honeymoon tour came to me. I mean, that idea was always there because my parents' honeymoon was a bit, when they got married back in the day, they had gone to Shimla on a similar kind of package honeymoon tour. So I just combined the two things and wrote it out.
So when you were writing it, like say Honeymoon Travels Private Limited, when we see that film, or even when it's talked about, it's looked down as a rom-com, that it's a very funny film, it's oddball characters and everything. But there's a very strange feeling that you get by the end of it, it's almost as if you're lamenting for a happy ending. There's this sadness, inherent sadness about that. Okay, happy endings don't exist because the end is so, for the lack of a better word, fantasy like happy. That you almost get a sense that okay, and when the narrator is saying that, people are gonna say that okay, this only happens in a film, but not anymore. So there's almost this inherent feeling that okay, this will never happen. So was that ever what was that? Where did that thought emerge from?
There was something that I read, the Times of India used to have that sacred tree and a kind of a quotation.
Yeah.
So I read somewhere that, be kind to everybody you meet because you don't know what's going on with them. So which is why I decided to kind of build these characters, these 6 couples who, for me at that time as a 25, 26-year-old, were probably people that I would not become friends with if I met, And I kind of tried to go into their stories and their lives and their compulsions and, see if I could connect to them. That really was one of the starting points. That was a premise that I kind of started with.
Okay. So, as you've mentioned in a lot of your interviews, that when you're writing these characters, you get into the world and you start researching. With, of course, like in the case of a lot of, say, Gully Boy or a lot of these other films. But when it's about regular people, like the world around us, so, and these are characters that you would normally not be friends with. What was that like to follow their stories and their journey? How did you get to know their world?
I mean, a lot of it was, I was drawing on people from my life, uh, an uncle. There's a lot of, different people from my life that I put in there.
Okay.
And obviously the thing is, even if it is regular people, you still have to, like, I had to research out what were their package honeymoon tours, stuff like that. You still have to research the world. You still, for example, just to use another example, ZNMD, Ritik's character, he was a financial bank. He was a stockbroker. Now you have to get into, even though there are people that you can relate to and they're from your world, you still have to get into that kind of stuff. You have to get into specifics. That's where you get nuance from.
So, like in an interview, you spoke that Ritesh's cousin was a stockbroker that you guys spoke to.
Yeah.
Yeah, to get the lingo right. So, when you were making this, of course, it's your first film, and see visually constructing the script and translating it there. What was the biggest challenge that you faced for the first time? Like, that where do I put the camera? Yeah, I got the drama right, I got the characters right. How do you go about that?
What I normally do is I don't, even now, I don't kind of decide first where I'm going to put my camera. Okay, I rather rehearse the scenes with actors. Obviously, before you come into the shoot, you do readings and rehearsals with them. But I like to do what is called a blocking. So on set, play out the scene with the actors. And that's when I decide where I should put my camera.
And what about the, like, say, specific things, like, when it's very treatment oriented, and like, I'll talk about Talash in a while because I have to fanboy on that for five minutes. So when a film is being seen through a certain lens, and it's like, the color palette and everything has to be pre-decided. In those scenarios, when there's something that happens in a scene that's it feels very like, this is going to change the course of the film. How do you deal with that? When it's you coming in with a certain level of preparation, and then on set.
Yeah, of course. Let's talk about Talash specifically, because at the end of the day, what Talash is, though it has many layers, it's a story of a haunting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, these are things that you discuss with your HODs, the production designers, Sharmishta, the DOP, Mohanan. We sat together and we sort of decided that, if it is the story of a haunting and there's this man who's almost in some kind of emotional lockdown. So if you see, we tried to go very monochromatic with Amir whenever you saw him. And it's only when there's full blown, when he's into this character of Rosie, and there's a song, which kind of, where he leaves Rani at the colony. And Jia Lagena. That's when color comes into his life. Before that, it's all pretty monochromatic and kind of trying to cue his emotional lockdown, his grief, his inability to really, because of what happened and the loss of his son. There's an inability to, and because he's not really dealt with it, there's an inability to interact with the people and the world.
Yeah. So, of course, Talash is, I mean, that is such an amazing film. It's something else. Even the title sequence of that film. And yeah, of course, there has to be, I have to talk about this before I get into Talash. You and title sequences. So, yeah, Luck by Chance. And then in Talash, how it begins. I mean, of course, maybe I'm reading too much into it. It starts with a rose kind of a thing that gets lit up, and of course there's Rosie in the film, and then we start that montage is so amazing. Please talk about how do you shoot that, how do you shoot, and even in Luck by Chance it's simple track in slow motion, but what was it that you guys went in with, okay, this is what we have to do? How do you what was the germination and everything?
I mean, obviously, let's talk about Luck by Chance. That was shot by me and Alvaro Gutierrez, who was also the DOP of Gold. Zoya and the main DP of the film, Carlos, who shot the rest of the film, they sat down with us. They gave us pretty much a brief, So they didn't want anything very gimmicky. They really wanted, the idea was to see the people behind camera, in a very simple, non-gimmicky way. So, you build on that brief. In terms of Talash, the idea was to, look at the beggar, look at the child selling balloons, look at the street walkers, the sex workers. So, we focused on them, and I felt it was better to just do these shots which kind of brought out their character, their loneliness, their alienation in a city.
Yeah. So, but how do you shoot that? How do you went about, what was the shooting of that in Luck by Chance? Like you went on different film sets and you guys with your cameras, or how?
Yeah, I mean, we had to go to different locations because otherwise it would all look like we shot it in the same place. So yeah, we had all that planned.
Like on different film shoots, you guys went and just,
Yeah, I mean, we went to a lot of studios. Some of it we, used the main unit as a backdrop. Some of it we went to new places and set up.
And in Talash, what was that? Because
Talash was shot all on location. So, I mean, obviously we had characters that we wanted to put in, but again, minimum lights, minimum crew. We shot it like with a guerrilla crew. We put in the characters and just tried to pretty much imbibe and, capture the feeling of Mumbai city in the night.
Yeah, and but in Talash, this is specific. Maybe a lot of it has got to do with the edit or something, but I don't know. Like the girl with the balloon, or even the watchman. It's almost, it feels like, I mean, later on we came to know that there's this feeling that even they might be ghosts that we're looking at, and the girl.
Yeah, I mean, more than ghosts, because again, metaphorically, the ghost meant something. It meant someone who's on the fringes of society.
True.
So obviously the characters that we put in were people who were, on the in the dark edges of life almost.
But none of the shots in that montage were staged at all. Like you guys just was.
No, they were staged. The characters were all staged. We did hair, makeup, wardrobe on them, but we put them into live locations with minimum lighting. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So because that image of the girl with the balloon, that is something else. And the way the film is shot, there's this. I mean, I went to Bombay in 2017, and I'd seen it in 2012 when I was in 8th standard, and I always imagined this is what the nightscape of Mumbai must have been like. And there's this very peculiar thing. Okay, there's no other film that shows the nightlife of Bombay does this. There's a very glowy, very Vaseline kind of a. I don't know if it's a filter. I don't know. There's a little glow that you guys do, and it's a neo noir. kind of approach with the music, very jazzy music. So what was that whole thought process behind? Like, what was behind that thought process? That when you were,
obviously we were trying to set up for the film that's to come.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's why we did very consciously go with this low lighting, dim, gloomy kind of setup. It's really trying to tell untold stories of these people who, like, again, I'm saying, are on the fringes of society.
Yeah. But mostly nowadays, when we see a setup like that, it's mostly neon lights, and it's very oversaturated in that sense. But there in Talash, even that glowy, it was almost as if, I mean, I might be reading it as too poetic. It was like someone who has been teary-eyed and is looking at this thing. Then I read it as, because the opening shot of the film was of a rose. I thought that the entire film is how Rosie sees the world, and specifically in the scenes where both of them are sitting together and there's the ceiling behind, there's certain glowishness which is not very, like, it's not very sharp.
Yeah, I mean, that I have to say, you can't give me credit for. You have to give the DOP Mohanan credit. He, I think, by far is one of the most artistic DPs I've ever worked with. And yeah, I mean, you'll have to ask him what he did. But I agree with you. The mood is intense. It's got a great vibe.
Yeah. So, and how did, like, somewhere we've read that the idea of Talash came from an actual ghost incident.
Okay, I have to stop telling this story and people have to stop asking me, because Zoya gets very irritated. But because, neither of us really believe in ghosts or anything like that.
Yeah.
But there, that spot near Haji Ali?
Yeah.
Okay. So, there have been, I think it's this urban legend. Like, several people have supposedly bumped into a woman there, and, and a lot of people say they actually felt the bump in the car and they stopped, and there was nothing. So Zoya had told me this story. I mean, randomly we were talking, and she was just saying that something freaky happened to her one night when she was out with some friends. And she says that, she was sitting in front. So she felt like she saw this woman running across the road, and she felt like the car hit her. Everybody else in the car, including the driver, felt like they hit somebody, so they stopped. And when they got out, there was nobody. And whatever, she had told me the story. And then I think about 6 or 7 months later, another person we know kind of told us the same story, and it had happened to them. So then we kind of started, making a film script out of it.
So why did you choose to place it in the the underbelly, the red light area of Bombay?
Again, see, for me, the character of Rosie was, to me, she's a metaphor. Okay, I mean, it's not. She's she's what it's the unknown, is what I saw it as, and at the same time, she was a sex worker. And again, during research, when we met several women who are involved in that business, to me, that's what struck me. That there's so many sex workers in India, but nobody's, and it's, people say it's the oldest profession in the world, but they're so not mainstream. They're always pushed to the edges. It's what people are trying to brush under the carpet. So the fact that it had to be treated like that came from the material and the research that we were dealing with.
No, but how did the material arrive at that point where there's like, okay, this is the world that we're going to explore?
Like I'm saying, the character
came in first.
Yeah, the character came first.
Okay.
And then you build everything around,
And how did the character, like Amir Khan's character, how did that come about? Suri's character?
Well, again, when we were sitting down and writing, I mean, we were bouncing different kind of ideas. But this cop who's very rational, very scientific, who just will not, it's nice to have two complete, that builds for nice conflict, I think. And to me, that was interesting. That a person like that, a completely rational, scientific mind, who is confronted with something that is completely unbelievable to him, till he goes through it himself. and then in the end has to admit to himself that there's more to what meets the eye.
But as you mentioned, like you don't believe in ghosts, neither does Zoya ma'am. So,
No.
any a film where where the character ultimately he has this closure when he talks to his own son. Uh,
Yeah.
so when it's something that's very like it contradicts your own beliefs. As a creative person, as an artist, how do you get the conviction to pull it off?
See, again, because you hope that people will see this as fiction. Though after Talash, I have to tell you, a lot of people come and start telling me their own supernatural experiences. Like I believe them and I'm part of it. But I don't. I mean, again, like I said, it was really about. One was this very interesting story that kept coming to us about this urban legend, and it's kind of freaky that. And it's not just two people, eventually when like a friend of mine lived in a building called Samudra Mahal right next to that area. So when I started talking to her about it, she's a friend from college, and she's lived in that building for like 15, 20 years. And she was like, there's been a lot of accidents on this road. So we just sort of started building into it. And there was, if you take the cop character, he really wasn't dealing with his son's death. And on some level, he blamed himself. And he really wasn't, he got really upset when his wife was trying to do planchette and reach out to the boy. And, whatever helps you fix yourself, whatever helps you deal with your pain, whatever, that's valid. So in that sense, it was kind of interesting to, like I said again, have your two main characters is a super rational cop and a ghost. And that really made for, I think, the drama and the conflict.
And like when you're writing a film like this, which is essentially a suspense thriller, there's two ways of going about it. You could have like, because keeping the rationality of it intact, like your personal belief on the thing. Uh, Very Hitchcockian thing to do that. In the end, it turns out that Rosie is not a ghost, but she's actually someone who's impersonating a friend of hers who died or something like that. I don't know. There's X number of things that would have gone. What made you choose this way? That no, it has to be a ghost.
I mean, there was something very poignant about it. There was something, for me, there was something very poignant about a person like Rosie who's been killed, and her, it was it wasn't even like anybody murdered her. The crime was apathy. And for me, that was way more poignant. And it created much more drama than, like you're saying, in the end, you kind of explain it in some way. So I decided to just run with that.
Also, one thing that the film has that's kind of very haunting is its background score. I mean, it's so amazing. Like the accident happened.
Ram Sampath did the songs and the music, and he's extremely talented again.
Yeah.
So
What was that like? What was the background score? Because like that's so.
Yeah, I mean, see, obviously we wanted, again, I see Talash more like a suspense drama, and interestingly, this was a script that Zoya and I had written, and Anurag at one point was wanting to do it. So it didn't materialize, but the way he saw the same film was a complete kind of a supernatural thriller. But anyway, that it didn't materialize, but the script was still there. And after honeymoon, when Ritesh and Farhana was like, what would you like to do next? I was like, that script that never happened that we wrote, because I always saw it as drama. For me, it's a suspense drama more than a thriller. And obviously, when there's a character like this, that's poignant, that's haunting, you need some kind of background score to cue that.
But how did you arrive that? Like, what was the making of that tune? Like were there multiple things that you guys went through?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm saying that's the, if I can say, it's the genius of Ram Sampath. What we did with the background score was, I just gave him, we wanted something for Rosie, we wanted something for the investigation, and we wanted, and Rosie's haunting theme sort of applied for whenever Amir's emotional lockdown scenes came. When he's in the night, if you see in the beginning of the film, when that's pretty much the same tune is playing. So that to me was sort of really bringing out the emotional turmoil in people.
When you were kind of visually constructing, like say even Kalash or Honeymoon Travels or Gold for that matter, what are the factors from the script that you're taking that okay, this is what needs to be translated visually when you're kind of sitting down with your DOP, that okay, how deep do you dig within a script to get the
I
visual?
always go on the subtext of the scene. Firstly, I like stuff that's a bit layered, it's a bit nuanced, things that have subtext. So the scene looks, on paper it might read like something else, but what that scene is supposed to mean, there's always a bit of subtext. And I usually hold on to that. That's where I take my cue from in terms of discussing whether it's art department, whether it's sitting down, with a production designer and figuring out colors, sets, what kind of thing, or with the DP or discussing what kind of shot taking to do, or background music, or, what I use for my cue is the subtext of the scene and the film.
So it's basically like it's scene by scene, or is it the film as a whole?
No, it has to be a whole, because I think that films have, you have a theme to the film, and that has to keep coming back recurringly. And I think that what I try to do is use all the various tools that are given to me as a director to try and cue that.
Could you break down a scene of yours like that, like where you directed it from, like you taking cue from the subtext and how it turned out?
Okay, let's look at, for example, since we are talking about Talash so much, let's look at, one of the characters' problem was that he couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, you have Jia Lagena, and after that is when a slight amount of color starts coming into his life, and eventually when she takes him to go to sleep, of course, it was a homage to Wong Kar-wai also, but yeah, we kept the. But when she leads him down the corridor,
Yeah.
and goes in, and he finally goes to sleep. So if you see the lead in, we in terms of visually tried to slow down. So we used high speed at that point. When we went into the room, there was a burst of color in the room. Colors that we've, apart from the song, never used anywhere in the film, just to cue some kind of healing happening to him. That this encounter with her, finally, you go into the room thinking that the hooker and the cop are finally going to do it. They're going to have sex or something like that. But actually, all it is she puts him to sleep.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about Gold. How did you? How did you arrive at, like, okay, it was after like 2012 was the last 2018, I think Gold came out.
Gold, yeah.
So in between, what was it like? Like, of course, you wrote.
Well, in between, I was setting up for another film around 2013, 2014. And literally, 18 days before shoot, the film got called off. So I took about 3 months to get over heartbreak. And, Gold was my friend Ankur Tiwari, who's a musician and is responsible for Gully Boy's wonderful soundtrack. We were talking, and I was like, I love sports movies. So he was like, Reema, why don't you look at 1948 when on the year of independence, the Indian team goes to England and kind of beats the British in front of a British crowd, in front of their king. And to me, that was glorious, But then when we started researching, and Gold, we researched for years and years. Like the research literally started sometime around 2010. Okay. And the story was so large. Yeah. The story was so large, so big, And if you take the entire tradition of Indian hockey, it's glorious, And when I started reading up, of course, you've heard of Dhyan Chand, you've heard of K.D. Singh Babu, but when I actually started reading the research that was coming to me, I realized there was a much bigger story here. I felt like it shouldn't be just an individual person's journey. And in all of this, Akshay's character, Tapan Das, there was a actual person like that. Obviously, his name wasn't Tapan Das, but he was the assistant manager in Berlin. And he actually pulled out, that Berlin match when Dhyan Chand was playing there, and Hitler was watching the match. And it's supposed to be one of the bloodiest hockey matches in the history of hockey, where the Germans were literally beating the Indians. Dhyan Chand chipped a tooth in that match. Because the thing is, it was clear the Indians were going to win. But pretty much the Germans were saying, like, don't score, don't shame us more. You know what I'm saying? And the Indians just went for it. So at halftime, this young assistant manager, and at that time, Indian, the flag that was used was not even allowed to be, it was a banned flag. The independence movement was a banned movement. And this guy pulls out that flag at halftime because the players were really demotivated. Nobody wants to be beaten and treated like that on a field, and the referees were not calling it out. It was quite an unfair match. So the players were really demotivated, and this guy pulls out this flag. These guys come out with like real Josh, and this same guy ended up being the co-manager in 1948. So for me, when I found this guy, I felt like I found the person through whom I can tell this story and span these many years. All the way from 36 to 48. That's 12 years,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the beginning of gold for me.
And when you started making that film, when we see that film now, it's we've seen, like, say, a film like Moneyball, which is about, not the players, not the coach, or even. It's about someone who's on the outside and he's watching his team and his turmoil. Now, when there's this very restrained approach to emotions in your films, but in Gold it seemed a little, heightened, even though it's very glorious.
Sure.
Yeah. So, how do you, switch between the two? What was that switch like?
Again, I go with what the material is. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. I'm saying, Talash was moody. It was about people in the fringes of society, that kind of stuff. This was a sports movie. And I felt like, in that sense, a patriotic sports movie, So I felt like I needed to take an approach which was different. I try and interpret each story depending on what the story is.
But were you ever, was there ever a thought that, okay, this is like patriotic, with going in with a patriotic motivation, but was there ever a feeling that it might turn into a little hyper-nationalistic?
Again, I looked at it like a period film where at that time
people were
hyper-nationalistic. Sure. Do you know what I'm saying? Now, just because of whatever's going on around us in present times, I still wanted to be true to that space. And it was hyper-nationalism that was very inclusive. It wasn't divisive.
True, but say in all of your other material, like your writing and your directorial films, if there is something that's heightened, there is always a foil that you have for that, to contest that.
Sure.
But in Gold, it almost felt like, and you do that without making a protagonist or an antagonist out of any of those two factors.
Sure.
But in Gold, it almost felt that it was tipping a little bit towards, that, okay, you're supposed to feel that these are the bad guys, these are the evil guys. Because you normally don't do something like that. Is that?
No, I get it. But here, again, for me, the story came from that. The story dictated it. Whether you look at the German match, for all the research that we found, the Germans were being a bit unfair to the Indians. If you again go into there was a lot of pressure put on referees. There was a lot of, in terms of trying to put India and Pakistan in the same pool so they cancel each other out. Because that was, if you see, hockey was brought to India by the British, okay? And Indians and Pakistanis became great at it. And actually, there's a very interesting story of Dhyan Chand's, where he was a lowly person in the army, but he was very good at hockey, so he was put into the hockey team. But at the same time, he's playing against his seniors. And he could not go out and hit those people directly. Like if he hit them on the field even by mistake, later on he would get it. So that's how we developed a really risky way of playing, where he wouldn't, where he was trying to scoop the ball away and then play long plays and stuff like that. So for me, it came from that. There were good guys and bad guys. Whereas in Talash, the main thread for me was empathy. It was the lack of the apathy that killed Rosie. So the approach I took really came to me from the material.
So there was this criticism about Gold that maybe Akshay sir's accent was not on point as much, or
Yeah.
the casting of it, or some certain aspects of that. What, like, was that ever that decision, was that motivated from the thought that I am creating a period piece, I need to reach out to more and more audience? Is the need for getting a star like that?
Well, that's a difficult question. It's. I think Akshay worked very hard on his accent, but Akshay has a very strong Punjabi accent naturally. So what you're really hearing is a mix of Punjabi and Bengali accent, which, I mean, I admit may not have worked very well.
And what was like the visuals of it was unlike any sportsman that we've seen here in India, at least. Like, the format of shooting it like that, and the lensing. How do you approach lensing? Let's start with that. Like, how do you approach lensing?
Again, these kind of things, obviously you decide way before what format you're going to shoot. What kind of we decided to go anamorphic on Gold.
Yeah.
And that decision obviously you don't do on set. But again, the lensing pretty much comes after I've blocked, and then you decide what your shots are and what kind of lens to use, which will best bring out this.
Is it ever dictated by, like, say, is it intact with the film grammar, or the way I'm kind of treating the film, or is it all instinct?
Of course, these are the things that you take into consideration. You're thinking on your feet, but I rarely do elaborate shot breakdowns. ADs are always at you, so I always give them something. But when I land up on set, my shot breakdown kind of goes for a toss, because I really like to see the scene being played out, and then it's all the HODs are on set. The DP and I discuss. We do the blocking a couple of times, and then arrive at what is the best place to shoot this, or to capture this part of the scene from, or this line from, or that moment from.
Yeah. So now coming to like I'll get stampeded. Like, people will stampede over me if I don't talk about Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara. So that's everyone's one of everyone's favorite films. So
mine too.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, as a writer, you write the film, and then, of course, Zindagi, because I was the second unit director, I was around. You know what I'm saying? But then you're quite out of the edit. I wasn't going into the edit every day. I'll go and hang and then leave. So finally, when you see the finished product, you're watching it. I watch it as an audience first, then the writer. So yeah.
Yeah, because in an interview with, I think it was Faridun sir who was taking with you guys, and he asked you which film is like more dear to you, Gully Boy or Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, and you were hesitating for a second, and then Saimam said, "Say the one in the theater." So with Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, so you guys started on.
I love Gully Boy too. I mean, I'm not distinguishing. I'm not saying I like this better, or I think that Zoya is, though she's a friend, I think she's a very fine filmmaker. So I love her work.
Yeah, we all love Gully Boy, but Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara is something special. So in that film, and this is something that I've noticed in almost all your films, except for Talash, that if there's a conflict, it's leading towards a resolution. It can either go A or B. It always chooses somehow to go, some in a third direction, which at times feels a little, like a little convenient when it comes to its resolution. Do you feel that?
No. Otherwise, I would have changed it when I was writing it. But can you give me an example in Zindagi? What?
Like in Zindagi, it was I think Abhay Deol's track, Kabir's track. that he was not ready to get married,
Yeah.
and in that moment, like Arjun had a whole that someone
Sorry.
comes into his life and kind of gets him out of there, and Imran finally confronts his father. But Kabir just admitted, like I get the point that for him it was just the admitting of the fact that I'm not ready for this marriage and I'm going to tell it to her. But it somehow felt that it was delayed a little bit, and it kind of took the in that moment it took the easiest way out, is what I got from the film.
Okay. I mean, see, the starting from all the three characters, the first character we got was Abhay's character, because it was about this guy getting engaged, going on a bachelor's trip, and then deciding he's not going to get married.
Yeah.
So in that sense, through the film, and then his fiance comes into the picture, and through the film what we were trying to reveal was that this man is probably engaged to the wrong woman. So it's not, we
So
don't
that
feel like...
yeah, so that arc is much more for us, like when we're seeing that, okay, this is not supposed to be with her, is what you guys were doing.
Yeah.
And like another example would be like in Honeymoon Travels, Shabana ma'am's and Baman Irani's characters, their journey. Gina, she come like in the end, it's almost as if I got the sense that you were trying to wind the film up pretty quickly. Is what I got.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That could have been more subtle. But she just lands up in Goa one day, fights with the father. But I mean, what I was trying to bring out there was that even though her relationship with the father might be a little difficult at this time, when she is in trouble, she comes to them. That was what I was trying to bring out. And I couldn't bring that out without this very convenient bringing her to Goa.
Yeah. So, and other thing that I observed in your screenplays is mostly like the biggest the common thread in all of films is that it's a bunch of oddball characters. Is what like a very journalistic way of saying oddball characters in a quirky situation on a journey that kind of changes them.
Yeah.
But it's mostly people who have this that catharsis that you're talking about in Zindagi Na Mile Dobara or in Honeymoon Travels Private Limited. Why is it that characters who are so like mirroring each other in a way, like almost opposites in a way, when they're together only then does that conflict kind of get resolved in their lives?
Again, like I'm saying, that's a question of personal taste. I like things that again, I said this earlier about Talash. To me, the drama and conflict coming from a cop who's extremely rational and a ghost and a relationship between them is what excites me. So that's personal taste, I think you can put it down to.
Okay. So, and like Gully Boy, this is like the last couple of questions before I open up for the audience.
Sure.
So Gully Boy, that's the thing that I felt, that Gully Boy is maybe it's got a lot to do with the editing as well, that it was edited like a very plot heavy film, but it wasn't. It was a very this is the sense that I got, that it was a very character driven story. Like it had not much of plot. It had a very story lifelike structure in the screenplay. And because the number of deleted scenes every day we saw, it was like we got the sense that it was a very spaced out film. So
yeah, because again, if I might interrupt you, for me,
yeah.
Gully Boys wasn't, of course, the backdrop is hip hop and there's one guy who's trying to break through that. But for me, and I think for Zoya, the brief I got when we were writing it, the film was about class. Do you know what I'm saying? So for me, that was, again, like I had mentioned subtext earlier. So to bring that out, there were many layers that we were trying to write out. And, yes, it is a coming of age story of this boy, but it's really about somebody who manages to transcend his class. But to show where he came from, we needed, for me, these many layers, because here he's a college boy. At the same time, he's pulled out of college and made to go and work as a driver. He's suddenly mingling in this world where, he say when he meets Kalki's character, he's mingling in a world that he has absolute no access to. But that's what, if you're an artist and you're good, you are able to transcend caste in a way that normal people aren't. You get accepted in a certain way. Now, to bring out that journey, we felt like we needed all these tracks. We also needed the track of Moin and his friends to show what Murad would be if he didn't have this.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what works in the film, very in a very fantastic manner. But the way it's played out, it's almost as if like it's very editing kind of a thing, that that something's about to happen, something will happen. So there'll be a conflict in his life. There'll be some trouble that he'll get into. But do you feel that if the film was more spaced out, like I got the sense that it would have been a much better experience if we had gotten to, if it was like a little long, is what I felt. Like, the way
Well, that's always a good thing if you're wanting for more, as opposed to seeing too much and being like it could have been a little shorter. So I'll just, the thing is, you take decisions. As a character, there was a lot of deleted scenes if you see, but at the same time, I think what Nitin Bed, the editor, and Zoya were grappling with numerous tracks that didn't sort of meander. Because if you see Dil Dharakne Do, for example, okay, I mean, just since we are talking, I mean, that film, when they were editing, there was Zoya really fought for the meandering aspect of it. And I think it worked for Dil Dharakne Do. But I don't know if it would have worked for Gully Boy. Because as an audience, if you're saying, I want more at the end of the film, it's actually a good thing. As opposed to people saying, "Arey yaar, 10-15 minutes could have been cut off."
Okay. So, okay, before I open up to the audience for the questions, what's the one thing that you would like to kind of, or a film that no one's probably heard of and you really like it, but you really want to recommend to people? Anything to guys like me or a bunch of aspiring filmmakers who are struggling to get their first film made?
Watched 3IN. To me, it's one of the most beautiful films I've seen in my life. It's very slow, but be patient. And the ending is just mind-blowing. It's just mind-blowing, So yeah, watch that. Watch Memories of Murder. For me, that was a huge reference point for Talash.
Yeah.
So I would recommend. I know you've asked for one, but I'm giving you
definitely. You can give me a whole list. That'll be like finding treasure. Yeah.
Yeah. So 3IN and Memories of Murder.
Memories of Murder. Cool. Okay. Let me just see what the audiences have sent in. So the first question is that do you ever take in the audience's point of view while writing? When you're experimenting with stuff or you're trying something new, do you always do you ever feel that how is the audience going to take this in what sense?
No, you don't. Audience comes much later. When you've done your rough cut, when you're doing your final cut, it's always, do I like it? For me, I'm my own reference, because I feel like if I don't like it, nobody else is going to like it.
Hi, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am.
Hi. Yeah, I see you. Hi, Nishant.
Yeah, ma'am. I wanted to ask the question that you have written many ensembles.
Yeah.
So, in each film that I have watched of yours that you have written, every character is etched out so perfectly, and they have their own moments. So, how do you etch those characters and their moments while writing, in the writing process? What is the process like to give each character?
The first thing to do is love your character. Whether it's it doesn't matter whether this is the main character or a peripheral character or a supporting part. I think you really have to love each character, and that makes you automatically want to justify them.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
When you try to depict a certain value or stand on a certain opinion, how do you consciously not make it look preachy?
Because see, that's because you're trying to have some style. Yeah, you don't want to talk down to people. You don't want to start behaving like a school teacher. You know what I'm saying? If you see most of our films, the subtext is very political, but you kind of try and do it in a entertaining way where you engage people to agree with your point, as opposed to tell them what your point is.
I wanted to know that how can I develop my writing skills in lockdown?
Write. Just
Yeah.
write every day. You know, the thing with a lot of people ask me this, yeah, and I think the point is not to give up too early, because even at, you know, in spite of all the writing I've done, the first draft that you write will always be a far cry from what you're imagining in your head. But don't give up and keep layering it. And really, I mean, how to develop your writing skills is simply and plainly by writing. You can't think about it and develop it. It's practice makes perfect, to use a platitude.
Okay. Dibanjan has this question that how do you write situational comedy scenes? Whether still be considered funny even while shooting or like during the editing, especially in ZNMD. Yeah, this is a question even I wanted to ask. That scenes that feel really improvisational in their nature, in terms of their humor, and when you're writing them, how do you make it? And during rehearsals, it might get a little tiresome after a while, and where the jokes are not landing. What do you do then? How do you guys approach that?
I mean, see, I think what helps is that Zoe, you know, there's two heads here. Zoe and I like to write together because of this, because you're constantly bouncing things each other. And I mean, yeah, how do you make it funny? Making things funny is way more difficult than making things happy or sad, or, you know, that kind of stuff. So I think writing anything that's, I'm not saying comedy, but even writing anything that's funny is, I think, way harder than anything else I've written. So yeah, you just have to keep at it.
So yeah, this is a question. This is my question. That how do you approach like your first film? Anurag sir wrote the dialogues, and then Farhan sir wrote the dialogues. So what's your approach in like when you're writing in a screenplay? So
Yeah.
at certain points, we get the sense that this is not organically a Hindi line. It's been like it's written in the screenplay as a model dialogue. Because one example that I can remember very clearly is that when KK Menon in Honeymoon Travels said that वो कोला थोड़ा funny taste कर रहा था.
Hmm.
So I could imagine that it must have written that it tasted funny. It must have been written there. So what's your approach when you brief someone for
Well,
making?
my Hindi is not good enough, yeah, to write dialogue. So I always write all my dialogue in English, and probably I must have sat on Anurag's head too much, because otherwise he's too talented for this kind of a slip up.
Prashant's question is that would you recommend any books on direction and screenwriting?
Well, you know, there's screenwriting, there your usual books. I think just Google them. For directing, I mean, I really think watch films, watch different kind of filmmakers.
But
Because
one
no,
writing book that you feel was effective, like was good.
screenwriting, you know, the books do help. There's Sid Barrett, I think.
Sitfield.
Sid Field.
Yeah.
So his books do, I think, make most sense. But in terms of directing, rarely have I read something which has spoken to me. You know, it's something very instinctive, yeah.
Direction.
I mean, yeah, books will tell you how to approach a scene. Books will tell you how to approach making a film. But you should, I think, develop your own way of doing it. And different people work differently. You know, there are some filmmakers who are very organized. They know exactly what they're going to do. They know their cut points also before they start shooting. There's some people who, you know, Wonkar Wai, for example, his crew is always up in arms because they don't even know which day this scene is from. So the costume designer doesn't know what clothes to put people in. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mimansha, please ask a question.
Hi, Reema. I really like Made in Heaven. I wanted to
Thank you.
ask you, yeah, I really liked how each character was built, coming from, and you had a chance to go to their backstories. So I actually had two questions. Do you think that the format of series gave you that liberty? And also working with not A-grade actors, did it allow you to make their characters more subtle in a way? I mean, did you find that it was rigid working with, I mean, established actors, and you could sort of experiment more with them? I just wanted to know.
See, I mean, to answer the first part of your question, yes. I think long format really gives you that freedom to go delve deep into your character, to bring out any kind of nuance. Whereas in a feature, whatever said and done, I mean, you have to limit it. Nobody's going to sit and watch, we live in an ADD world. So the best of films, once you cross about 2.5 hours, people are going to start getting edgy. They'll just want it to end. So and like I was saying earlier, it's always when people say you should have they want to see more. It's you're on a good footing as a filmmaker. But long format, there's a freedom to go into you can devote a lot of time into each character.
Okay, there's another question from Nishant. How did you come up with the polygamy subtext in Gully Boy? He really loved that.
Well, I mean, that was that came from Zoya, and I think that as she really wanted to question that.
The polygamy aspect of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question is that they say writing is rewriting. How can one tighten the script after the first draft, which feels almost complete? Like, after the first draft, you've churned everything out and almost feel like, but how do you go back to, being that brutal and killing it and then reworking it? Like,
I mean, see, you give you're really close to your work, right?
Yeah.
So when you first write it, you think everything is working. Then you give it to other people and you get a heart attack because nothing is working. So it's really from reactions, you know what I'm saying? But I think the best reactions come from writers. So I always finish writing something and we reach out to a bunch of friends who are writers and get their reaction.
okay, so here's a question, which is a very popular question. A lot of people have asked me that. तो आपके और जोया मैम के बीच में जब कोई मतभेद होता है, how do you guys when there are disagreements while writing?
Oh, we have them all the time. In fact, we had one yesterday when we were writing. We were making some changes on MIH2. So disagreements happen all the time. One person has to convince the other person. That's all. And usually the better idea does that. Or there's a difference in opinion. It's really not about I'm going with this because it's my idea. Obviously, you're fighting for it because you think it's a better idea. Yeah. So these kind of conflicts always get resolved with the better idea lives. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we cannot resolve it that day because
the scene where you guys agreed upon, and then how we like it ended up in the film.
Well, again, I mean, let's take Gully Boy's example, okay? So I don't know why Zoya from the beginning wanted, Moin was Murad's best friend on some level, and Sher becomes his new best friend, But yeah. Murad was, and what Zoya wanted was for Moin to die, okay? I mean, this wasn't I don't know why. So she went on about Moin dying, but finally when we got to the end of the film, I strongly felt Moin shouldn't die, and at that point, it made sense to her. Though for 2 months she was going on about Moin dying. So it's that. It's not about personalities, it's about the better idea. And you fight for an idea and you yourself 2 days later, you sleep over it and you yourself don't think it was worth the effort to fight for it.
This idea of seeing the film through a character which may or may not be an active part of the plot, like Pluto Mehra or the radio guy in Honeymoon Travels, poetry used as kind of like an expository device where it's beautiful and it's telling what the character's feeling. So what's that about? Like, how do you why do you do that?
All of these actually were it was to break away from that conventional VO. So Pluto for us was like Desmond Morris was a huge influence, trying to kind of it's a dog looking at humans, because we felt like we definitely needed a voiceover to tie all of it together, this massive cast, this massive thing of what you're trying to say in terms of people who are so vulnerable to what their perception is, or other people's perception is of them. But it's just attempts to move away from the conventional view. Now, that might work for some people, or like a lot of people didn't like it also, gave us full galleys. So it depends whether it works or not.
Okay. Someone's asked us that how does one develop a screenplay from an available plot?
I'll tell you what my process is.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of thinking about the people, the characters, the why. Why do I want to make this film? What am I trying to say through it? You know what I'm saying? You do a bit of soul searching in terms of what is your involvement? What are you trying to bring out, or why is this interesting to you? And obviously, you research the hell out of everything. But once that is over, I like to put down, and I think it's a tried and tested method for both Zoya and me. We kind of write one line, like a story of the entire film, before you get into screenplay. So you don't go to screenplay at all, because for me, what happens and what we've seen is when you start writing scenes, you get very attached to them. And then when you step back, whether this scene is doing anything for the entirety of the film or not, it's there because now you're attached to it. So I would always recommend that you get your story down first, then go further. And you not just like have a rough idea of beginning, middle, and end. Have a very good idea of each kind of scene. How is it bringing out your themes? How is it bringing out your characters? How is it bringing out your plot? How is it pretty much saying anything you want to say? And then approach the screenplay. That's the screenplay writing of it is the easiest part, frankly, for me, for writing. The story writing is the most difficult part.
So, yeah. So finally, which film are you directing next?
Well, I'm working on something. And also, we've kind of kickstarted Tiger Baby, which, we're just waiting for COVID to get over. So there's a bunch of shows. There's a bunch of films that we want to do. And currently I am writing a feature film script for myself, which is too premature to talk about because it's still in that story phase. You know what I'm saying? I haven't got it yet. So, yeah.
So Zoya ma'am will be writing this with you as well?
Yeah, we're writing it together.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, with this, we come to the end of today's session. Thank you so much for doing this. It was great talking to you.
All right. Thank you for having me. Bye.